as we're looking at the ritual reason why, we need to back it up all the way to the question, what is worship? So, and the word worship kind of, we use it almost as jargon in our, we naturally understand it. But what the word comes down, actually, the origin of the word actually gives it more meaning, I guess. It comes from an Anglo-Saxon word meaning worthship. So that when you're worshiping a thing, you are saying that this has worth, and so that's why you're doing what you're doing. That you are recognizing it and giving it worth, both acknowledging the fact that it has worth and giving it worth by what you are doing. So now, one of the things that we have to understand is that when we are worshiping, that while it's all well and good, if we get something out of it, the thing being worshipped does not necessarily, our emotions are still present, are almost irrelevant in the worshiping of the thing. Because if you back it all the way up to say the temple or giving a thing, it's when they were worshiping things, they didn't put necessarily an emotional price on what they were doing. This is what it says. It's because essentially you could get too close and you could really emote all over the thing. And say in the sacrifice of animals, as you what they originally wanted you to do, put your hands on the animal and essentially putting your sins on this, then you slit its throat and say this is happening in place of me. But that's all well and good. You can't. It has space for your emotions there. But if you did the same thing, it is still a valid form of worship, even if you're emotionally distant. In this one situation here, one would understand that you would seemingly want to emotionally distance yourself. That one's too real. Here I am. And so you can see that as it progressed on, they did in fact distance themselves from it because that's too real. Okay, well, I'll have the priest do it, and then I don't have to do it, and then, in fact, I can essentially just send it off like the meat packers, and they'll offer it, and I'll see the smoke come up, and I say, all right. So, and that allows you to be almost too emotionally distant, because now it becomes almost a bargain type thing. So, okay, well, if you'll offer to that, so you have the word would come to me, the kind of the barter system type thing that springs up that Jesus addresses when he says, when you have the temple at Jerusalem and everybody's living out into all the areas of Israel, you have to come to Jerusalem to be the only place to worship. And so you bring your sacrifice, and what starts off as your prize cow turns out to, after a couple 100-mile trek through rough, not necessarily your prize cow anymore. Right. And so then they would offer and say, well, I tell you what, why don't you sell that cow at the good price and then take that money, buy one of our cows that don't have to do all these things, and then you can offer that sacrifice. And so it's still in the meaning of it, but you don't have to worry about the travel. And so they would say, okay, well, I sold my cow here, and I get here, and, well, I mean, how about your next best? You won't, they won't know. You don't know what I can afford. So how about your next best? And then next best becomes, well, how about what do you got in the back? This is you got the three-legged donkey or the three-legged cow that's got horns up and down and tongues hang out and you're like, that's the one I want, because that allows me to keep as much in my pocket as I can. And so then you've become too far removed from that. You need to come in and say, no, so this is all I'm worth. And so we don't realize theologically all you're saying is this is what I'm worth. Because this is all the things that I'm placing on this cow are my sins. I guess I don't value myself very highly. And so you can see how our ritual, the things we do ritually have a theological outcome on what we are actually doing, even if we don't know it or not. And that'll come out here in a second. But so like I said, worship is bound to stir the emotions. We can't, if we think about it enough, then we can't help but have it. But it is still worship even if we don't do it. In fact, worship has three aspects to it: an emotional, an intellectual, and a volitional. It has to have the will, our desire to do it. You have to our understanding of it theologically, or our emotional. These are all things that we put into our worship, and they're just kind of woven together. Some a little more, some a little less, but they are all woven into the tapestry that is our worship of God. And it changes each week, each day, each hour, as to how we're feeling. And so the will has as big a part to play as anything else. Because you can't just necessarily roll out of bed and start the act of worshiping. I mean, you can, but then that says something theologically. So all the effort you put into the worship day says something about the offering that you are bringing to be presented as well. So, okay, well, I am offering the fact that, I had to find this church. I had to make sure that I went to bed early last night so that I could wake up in time to go to church. I sought out this church. I had to drive, there was a train. There was all sorts of things that went into this that I'm offering there. There's, the kids were crying. It's a really nasty day. I don't want to. So you're bringing all of this, and it would be much easier to just say, I'm just gonna go outside and worship. That costs you nothing. You walk outside. It's a pretty day. It's easy to worship on a pretty day. Well, outside, it's easy to worship on a pretty day. I would say it's easy to worship in here on a nasty day because you're not missing anything. But all the things that we bring into worship are all the things that we offer to God in our worship. And so all of these things, our volition or our will shouldn't be neglected in that. And so the more you can make in preparation to going to it, the more you're bringing to it. Say, I'm going to write down all the things I want to pray for beforehand. That way I'm not just sitting down before Mass thinking, okay, I made it. Now what am I going to pray for? Oh no, I'm just going to sit here so I look like I'm praying. Which is, you've made it there early, so that's okay. There's a lot of that goes in seminary. You see people slide into the last second. I do it all the time, or I did it all the time. Slide into the last second, then the bell rings, and you're just kind of still walking. Oh yes, I've been praying here for a long time. Yeah, exactly. You want to be there by the time the priest turns around after for the say the Lord be with you. I've been here the whole time. So you need to be there by then at least.
I sometimes ask him to help me.
Uh-huh.
When I kneel, just help my thoughts to go where they need to go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you just don't know how to pray, you just have to Lord.
Yeah. And that's a valid place to be. You're sitting in there. I just need to, because when we go into a place and you sit down and pray, you're essentially saying, help me to unload all of this
Yes.
stuff
Yeah.
so I can
Yes.
have the space
Clear
to
the
worship.
cobwebs.
Yeah.
Yes, the
They're the
clutter,
cobwebs,
Yeah.
I can-
the weak
I can-
clutter, yes.
Yeah. You know, you shut the door.
Concentrate on him.
Yeah, you shut the doors, and all of a sudden you are transported to another place. And that's another thing we'll notice in all of this, that we are doing otherworldly things, and so it's only natural that we would want to separate that place out, and that's entirely different, say, than your places that are trying to say, well, what we're doing is just like everything else. We're trying to make it as normal as possible. So we have it at a movie theater because you're used to going to movie theaters. So they're trying to make the barrier to entry so low that anyone can essentially stumble into it. And they're doing that on purpose.
Stadium.
Yeah, a stadium. Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're trying to make that barrier so low because they're reaching out for non-believers. So they don't want, and so there's where they are says theologically what they believe. Yeah.
That's why
So
we
wh-
miss worshiping in the church so
Mhm.
much, all these months, because it's our safe house.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You know, you walk in there and, you know, you get unburdened, or, you
Mhm.
know, and if you're not feeling it, you ask for it.
Somebody-
But for me, I walk in and it's like,
Mhm.
you know, it doesn't mean I don't have the clutter and I need to pray about getting it out of my head, but you just feel safe.
Mhm.
That's what somebody, years ago, somebody who hadn't been here in a while, and he came in, and he looked at me, he goes, Dave, he said, I just feel such an amazing peace when I walk through these doors.
That's,
Mhm.
it just,
I feel
it just
safe.
does, it gives you
Yeah.
goosebumps sometimes.
Well, and so what people had to, go ahead.
What about you guys though, that are working during
Oh.
worship? I mean, it's an action, but does that interfere with your
I don't think so.
worship?
At least
With
not
the
to
work
me.
part?
It can, because, you know, it's my job.
It's a job.
And so I look out and I'm like, oh, where's people? You know, you're like, oh, I noticed this person isn't here. I wonder what's going on with them. Or is it, you know, is it something I said? Are they sick? Are they,
Yeah,
is it just one of those weeks?
It affects you, doesn't
It can. It can. And so there's all sorts of things that the closer you get in, the more, because essentially the closer you get in, the more you have to be paid. And because you're buying time. And so once you get paid to do it, all of a sudden it's easy to make that job the sole focus, because this is an ability of my worth here. Saying, okay, if the people are here, okay, well, if they're not here, why aren't they here? Is it, what are all the things? And it's easy to fall into that rather than just saying, okay, I'm doing the mass here to the best of my ability. All these things are.
It's a perfectly normal thing.
Oh,
because,
absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
you could be having a birthday party and half the people show up,
Mhm.
and you're thinking, gosh, how come the rest of them didn't come? Did they not like me? Or
Yeah.
they, you know, you just start thinking, you feel rejected, I guess.
Or at the
Yeah.
like at the 8 o'clock today, I was in the midst of saying mass, and I started thinking about this. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to incorporate that into it, and so I'm thinking about the thing coming next, because that's also my job.
Yes.
So it's not even about my emotional understanding. It's all of a sudden I have to think about the entire experience
The big
today.
picture.
Yeah, the big picture.
And even if there's just one in the pews,
Yeah.
you're touching that person.
Oh, exactly.
And you don't know how many people they're going to touch
Yeah.
after they've heard the word and they go out into the world.
Right.
So you don't know.
Yeah.
To me, I don't know if it's this way with you guys, but to me, I feel like I'm getting a big, like, bear hug almost from God.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when,
Yeah.
you know, the gospel's being read, when the sermon's being done and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's like an even more tighter, because you're getting to me, it's almost like a more personal speech, not so much speech, but message.
Mm-hmm.
When, you know, the gospel and the sermon and stuff are being
agree.
done.
There are times when I have to hold back the tears.
Yeah.
It's so emotional.
Yeah, and then
And you just want to sob and go, everybody will understand. Just
Yeah.
let it out. You just do. It just
Then
makes
my-
you, allows you to do that.
Yeah, there is space for that.
Mhm.
But then on the complete opposite end of that, a priest buddy of mine, when we were both in high school, he said, all of that is good. He says, but what about when you don't feel that? Does that mean it's less real, less efficacious for you if you don't bring all of those emotions? I said, well, no. He said, exactly. Because it's not based on necessarily even what I can bring to it, what I am bringing, because sometimes I'm approaching the Mass in a state of emptiness needing to be filled. Sometimes I'm approaching it in a state of fullness, coming to express that fullness. Most times it's someplace in between that. And
Sometimes I think, oh wow, Father's just talking to me.
Yes.
Mhm.
You ever get that?
Oh,
yeah. Yes.
Oh, he just talking
Yes.
to me. I better
Yep.
listen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Better tune in.
Yeah.
The ears spike up. It's like
Yeah.
Like,
radars.
was he a little fly on the wall?
It's like,
Yeah.
What's he doing?
Yep.
and so it's that goes back to theologically what they discovered with the Donatist, essentially with Saint Augustine again, listening and thinking through the fact that the Donatists were the ones who, when Christian persecutions were happening and people would come and say, well, you gave up the scriptures, or you weren't willing to be martyred for the faith. You wanted to save your own skin. So because of that, you've ceased to be a priest, you've ceased to be a Christian. Everything you do after is now null and void. Because people would come back and say, I had my fingers crossed behind my back the whole time, and so still a priest, still celebrating all the sacraments valid, because we know that what I just did, they would have to offer a pinch of incense as a token to worshiping the Roman god, or the Roman emperor, so that he wouldn't kill you. And so they said, we know that there's no such thing as an idol, so really I'm just doing this so that I can continue to minister to my flock. The Donatists were hardliners, and they said, no, once you did that, you've now publicly professed a belief in a deity other than that, so everything you do is invalid. St. Augustine comes in and dealing with the Donatists says that can't be. He says, because the sacrament is not based on the worthiness of the minister. So you don't have to worry about whether or not I've gone on a murder spree, 10 minutes before Mass. Because even if I did, it's based on what God is doing through me, not anything I'm doing. And so it's, I like to use this. So if you're baptized in the name of Jeff, you're going to hell. Because even though I'm doing all the things, if I'm not baptized, if I'm doing it on my own authority, then I'm not baptizing you into anything but Jeff. However, if I'm baptizing you with the authority of God in the name of the Trinity, I am now baptizing you into Him, not me. That's why it's efficacious. So it doesn't. So in all of this, theologically, what we are bringing to the Mass, that is just where we are in it. The fact that we are there, then it, the Mass is efficacious whether or not we believe it to be or not. Whether or not we are emotionally invested or if we're wandering. And some people, they'll in fact think, well, because my mind wandered during the sermon, or I was thinking about this other thing, so now I can't receive Mass. I can't receive a communion. I'll come up with a thing. Saint Augustine would say, you have a faulty understanding of what's going on. While appreciated that you want to be attended, if you're not there, it sounds like you need to be filled rather than coming from a place of fullness. And so So the main point is come,
Yes.
rather than come
Amen.
fully prepared.
Amen.
I'm a little
Your guilt
confused.
doesn't exclude you.
Yeah.
To go. Sorry.
Can you kind of expand a little bit more, or explain a little bit more when you say that? I'm gonna use Deacon Mike for an example, because
Uh-oh.
he had a
Turn the
bad
camera,
experience.
turn it.
Yes, right. He had a bad experience. He felt. I'm not sure how.
Right.
Not sure. Well, he came in on Sunday and ended up not taking communion that day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I felt anger in my heart that day.
Right.
Okay.
And that the scripture says, so there's a difference, I think, by saying, okay, I'm coming, but I'm not going to receive because of this, and it's my intent to then fix that so that I can come back, as opposed to, well, I'm going to come, and because Jesus said don't this, I don't want to deal with it, so I'm not going to. There's a difference in that, but I mean, there's the same kind of the Anglican Church is kind of taken that same approach as to people who are divorced when it comes to receiving communion. They're like, well, I mean, what is it a rope to exclude people who are now in a state such that they cannot now ever receive it, because unless they either get it annulled or whatever through that, or is it or is this a hospital for sinners? Are we trying to fill you up, or are we trying to require you always to be here? You see, there's a theological stance for both, and so you have to walk that line to be able to be a hospital for sinners and say, no, this is not the end. You have not just committed the unforgivable sin. You are, there. Let's help you work through this, as opposed to saying, okay, well, because we believe what we're doing is so high, we have to hold you to high standards, because Christian life is different than regular life. See, there's everything you do says something about who you are theologically.
So as a hospital, then the people that are walking in have all kinds of ailments. Some may just have a cold,
Uh-huh.
and some may have cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to treat them at
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking what Angela said, are we, when we don't, we don't want to take communion because, we've sinned and gotten angry that morning or whatever, are we judging ours? Are we
Playing God?
playing God? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, we're punishing ourselves instead of going to the altar and asking God for forgiveness of that
You
sin.
kind of need to do both. Is a willingness to do both. Say,
So we're
and-
repenting.
So it's
We're punishing
sometimes
ourselves.
you say, because I'm sick, I'm not going to, I'm going to use a crutch. Because I rolled my ankle, I'm using a crutch. Or because I cannot go out on my evening run, which is good for me, because I rolled my ankle the last time. So I'm going to refrain until I'm better. So that's essentially more what it's like when you pause to say, I cannot do this right now because of this. And but there's multiple mentalities. I think what St. Paul is talking about, and what happened was a very good thing to say. I'm not going to do this so that I can come in and receive the sacrament free and clear. That way, I don't have anything separating me from God. I'm not preoccupied thinking about this. I get that. That's a spiritual discipline as opposed to the theological reality. So, but then there's also the mentality of, I'm so mad that I need this in order to be able to forgive them. And so this is part of the way that I'm getting to that point, so that I can leave that. So it's and then you can say, okay, let's let's change this avenue of grace that you're seeking from the Eucharist, which is our regular point of contact. You say, okay, let's change that from what you're receiving here, because what you're trying to do, you need surgery, maybe even major surgery here, so that we need to come, and going to a clinic is more than the clinic can do. So like the general confession at Mass, what that does is it essentially covers all of your sins from between confessions, essentially. And so in doing that, saying, well, I've confessed it, I mean it, I can't get to that point. And so you get to say, what you need to do is you need to come to confession so we can deal with it pointedly. And say, okay, this is the point. Now we need skilled medicine as opposed to just going to the clinic.
Yeah. It was recommended for me to read Psalm 69, which is partially why I included in my sermon, because it spoke to me and I went from feeling anger to pity. That's what I got out of it. And I needed that at that particular time, and it was a wise suggestion, so I valued it and it helped me out. So I'm an open book, believe me.
Yeah. So, but that's what it does. It says, I need to refrain here in order to go get real medicine, so that I can come back in. So that next time I come to this hospital of sinners, now that it can be for me a clinic, rather than Houston, the cancer hospital in Houston. Yeah. Mayo Clinic type thing. Yeah.
So that's the difference between going up and receiving the sacrament and just going up and getting a blessing.
Correct. That's why the spiritual communion is there. So you say, I want to receive this, but I cannot now, come in. I'm going to make this irregularity, as efficacious as I can.
Okay.
So, sometimes it is. I need to receive a blessing until I've gotten past this, whatever it is, and then I can go forward. Now, because one of the things going on is that all of our actions, again, they say something theologically, and so stumbled upon a real wonderful understanding of what is going on in the Mass is a threefold kind of understanding. So what happens in the Mass, the reason we can say it's the ongoing sacrifice of Christ rather than redoing it each time, which is what we've been accused of doing, is you're going in and saying, no, this is the one sacrifice of Christ that was instituted in history, just like this. We meet it in the present and continue those actions for its ultimate reality in the future. And so we're split between the shadow and the reality. What Plato talked about, and is we're in a cave essentially, and we're in here, and there's a flame behind us. And every time someone passes in front of the flame, we can see what is going on the shadow on the wall. But the reality is actually happening out here. So, but we see it. We've never seen anything else. We think it's the reality. Only then when the chains get broken, when we go outside, first we can't see it all because it hurts. Our eyes aren't adjusted to it. But then we see the reality that was only the shadow here, even though this was real to us at the time. This is kind of the Platonist understanding, but it works really well for understanding how form and image work in theology.
Is that almost like blinders?
Sort of.
Or really dark, being blind and then having your eyes opened to the spiritual.
Yeah, it's
Perception.
Yeah.
My perception isn't always correct.
Or spiritual blindness?
Well, it's waiting on the reality, because technically we're not saved until Christ comes back and saves us. We're working on it here. We don't actually receive salvation until here, when He comes, gives it to us. Because until then, we're not dead. We have no need of it, really. We're just banking on that until then. We're functioning in the what's the word I'm looking for? Then it's in here. In the anyway, in the earthly as we await the heavenly. So there's two stages here. One is the ultimate reality, just like Hebrews talks about. There's the temple on earth, and they did the sacrifices, but that was based on the heavenly one, where the sacrifice is ongoing. This is a participation here in the ultimate reality. Mm-hmm. So that's what the Old Testament was understanding. Jesus comes in and says, "Okay, I'm going to the type is now passed away. Behold, the reality has come." But we're still waiting on that reality to where we actually participating in the with ourselves, our souls and bodies, actually physically in the New Jerusalem right now. And now we're going to get a little bit heady, because what happens because this is a reality, that heavenly reality, it comes in and fills the entirety of it, the gap. So we're participating in this, even though we're doing it here. Just like when Jesus said it in the Bible, on the first supper, on the Last Supper, the first Last Supper, the Last Supper. So He instituted it here. We're participating in it here, but it's pointing to the reality, the heavenly banquet in the New Jerusalem. So that is when we will fully do that. And then Jesus uses this as today you will be with me in paradise. He doesn't say as in today, like right now I'm currently hanging on a cross. So today's kind of booked for me. But that today, the ultimate today, where there's no before and after, there's just today. There's present. Is there, not here. We're participating in today. The reality is today, but that means it's today and not tomorrow or yesterday.
It's like right this second.
It's now. It's Spaceballs. When they're watching the movie. When is that happening in the movie? Now. What happened then? Oh, we just missed it. Mel Brooks is brilliant.
Oh yeah.
So it's that ultimate reality of the historical reality. And that's what all of theology is based on. So now, so the spaces that we worship now also say things. There's a reason why we've incorporated them in there, in this thing we call the church. Things have the presence of, we don't include things just willy-nilly. Or even if we do include things willy-nilly, that says something theological of what we're doing. Because practicality trumps everything. Then theologically, you're able to think about greater things in there. Well, why are we doing that? Because we need light in the church. What does that say about light? What does that say theologically? Well, we have the light and it banishes the darkness. There's all these things. Practicality always comes first. So there's like here in a second we're going to look at the baptismal font. We got to place it somewhere. Where are we going to put it? Well, if we put it at the back, then that's the first thing we do is we go in, we stick our hands in the thing, and we bless ourselves like that. Okay. So what does that say? Why do we do these things? And so the way the church is laid out is in itself practically, but theologically, it gives us more than what we just encountered. So again, on page 3 here, we're gonna kind of set it as you walk in. Actually, I didn't stop. I didn't put things like doors, the closed doors. So in our church, we have the outside doors, the narthex. Then you have the entryway. Well, that allows us a space to distance ourselves from the real world, So we have a chance, and we can come in and say, okay, I'm going into worship. That's one of the things I like about incense. You come in, now all of a sudden you walk outside, it smells like outside. During the spring it smells like death. But then inside you have, during the inside you have, it just smells like nothing. It's got no smell. But then you come in, and all of a sudden you're hit in the face with incense. And it's like something is different in my brain. My nose smells it. And that's one of the things that I didn't put in here that I should have. That worship is, it takes our bodies as well as our brains and all these things. So what we do with our body, then, the senses should not be neglected in the service, because they can tell us and spark in us a reality that we cannot get merely from head knowledge, or merely from, we're participating with our bodies. So we're not just brains, we're body and soul, mind, all these things we're bringing, and so we're participating. That's how we stand, we sit, we kneel, we genuflect, we make the sign of the cross, we do all sorts of things, and that's on purpose, to get us to use more of ourselves in the service. And that's why, so you have this, but in the Protestant Reformation, a lot of that was stripped away. We've gotten too big. We need to bring it back to the basics. And so they stripped absolutely everything out. No more stained glass windows, no more paintings, no more saints, no more statues, no more any of this stuff. And so all you get is a pulpit and a white room. That's back to basics. But what that says is the only thing that is important in your worship is your brain. Because the sermon, and in fact, I pointed here, actually this pulpit is in the middle. And it's big and huge, so you're God speaking to you. And so now it's just my brain, me, and God, everyone else there. I'm not here for worship for you. We're not a corporate body here. It's me. I am the body of Christ. I have to accomplish all of these things. And so you get the kind of the different emphasis from the Protestant Reformation to the Catholic. And granted, it was overdone at that point. I mean, but then again, if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. This is the Spanish way, my favorite way. If one candle's good, 1,000 candles is better.
Oh, Lord, yes.
Yes, it's exactly, and it's just
It's pretty.
one of my. Maybe next time I'll bring it up, or when we get into worship. They have this thing in the various. It's only in this one town in Spain, but they have this. This thing where they're doing a Eucharistic procession, and I think it's on Corpus Christi. And so they go around and they're processing the body of Christ and the monstrance, and then what they'll do is they have these. Everyone brings their babies out and they put them on mattresses, and then they have this little guy in a hood. He's supposed to be Satan, and he jumps over jumps over the baby. And he always jumps over the baby, never lands on the baby, he jumps over the baby. And then right after he jumps over the baby, the priest comes and blesses him with a sacrament. What that says in a very weird way is death is, through death, and Christ gives you life after that. But it's a way over the top way of doing it. And one of the reasons I adore the Spanish so much.
To me, it's like, okay, so death's going to raise above me, and where's God going to be there to protect me?
Right there.
At the end.
Yeah.
But where is he at when death is above me?
we all have to go through death.
Do you need help bringing the mattress in?
Working on it. But yeah, I mean, everyone's going and
Yeah, trust me, in a Spanish-speaking church, in the winter, you don't need a heater because the candles are lit to the,
it's beautiful.
oh my gosh.
Thing of beauty.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And they'll do it during the summer too. That's why one time I fainted in the church. They had to carry me outside. I mean, as a kid. Yeah, we were too close. We were like 4th row back and those candles were aflame. And it was hot and you're kneeling,
It's the
you know.
beauty of holiness.
Oh my
Yeah, that
Lord.
radiance is
Oh.
just
Washed
hitting
over
it
you
just-
until you
because
pass
in
out.
heaven there is no need for light.
Yeah.
Christ is the
Yes.
light, and see, you can see the theology that
Oh,
they're
yeah.
portraying there.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just, but and the reality is it's hot.
When you talked
Oh,
about
nice.
the Protestant clearing everything out, making it basically starting from scratch,
Uh-huh.
I know what the meaning of clearing the altar is during the Christmas season and stuff, but is that almost like what the Protestants were doing?
No. No, what they were trying to do is strip it all of worship of all of the extra. Yeah, what the stripping of the altar is doing is showing the humility that Christ experienced in the garden and all of these things, stripping that all of that away. That's what that is. What they were doing is just they said that they threw the baby out with the bathwater is what they did. They said this has gone way too far. We need to kind of rein this back in so that we can. There's a couple of years. I say a couple of years now. Now it's probably like a decade. That song. I'm getting back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you, Jesus. It's all about you. And so that's what they're doing is they're trying to make it a personal experience. All of this other stuff doesn't matter. While true, it does matter because all of that says something theologically.
Yeah.
And so that means I have to always be engaged. I have to always be on the top of my game because if I'm not, then I'm somehow doing this less than. And so what this says is, come as you are. We'll make up for what's lacking, and you'll participate in it, and you'll get there as you do. So now the elements of the church. So you have the doors to help you enter into this sacred space, this other space, and in the Orthodox Church, it's entirely other. You got icons everywhere. This is the saints of the church. They're with you, and the altar is obscured. You can't see it at all. And they're over the top, and I love it. So the first thing you have is the church is oriented east to west. Even if it's north to south like ours, it's represented east. East is always ahead of you. West is always behind you. And so what did I say? So north is always that way. South is always that way.
Okay, so west is in front.
Nope.
No, west is
East
behind.
Yes, because Christ is. Where is Aslan going to come in the Chronicles of Narnia? Always from the east. That's where Christ is going to come, from the east. The sun rises in the east. Yeah, that's new life comes from the east every morning, and so that's where new life is going to be. And in fact, when people were buried, they were always buried with their feet facing east, so that when Christ comes, they would stand up, and they would meet him that way.
Sure.
Exactly, and so that's why things are done for a reason. It speaks theologically.
Okay, so if east is in front,
West is in the back.
back,
Yes.
so north would be
That,
left or right?
that way,
Left.
right? North is this way.
North is that way.
East
Yeah,
is
east is this way. Yes.
yes. So if we just go like that, so north would be that way, south would be that way. And yes. And so you enter at the west of the church, and you enter. And so if the sun rises and you have day and life, then it sets in the west, death. So you're entering from the realm of death, passing through the baptismal font into life. So you go, and that's why the baptismal font always at the back of the church, unless they put it on wheels and wheel it up to the front of the church. But if it is fixed, it should be at the back, because you enter through death, in death, through baptism into new life. So that's why it is the way it is. And then you enter into the nave of the church. You look up, nave from Navis, boat, and it looks like a boat. And so the ark of the church is what buoys you through all this. This is and it goes even more. The nave is the church militant. That's us. That's where we sit when you walk into a church. You come in, you sit down in the boat. This is the church militant. Church militant meaning those who are going through life right now. Next, you have the lectern and the pulpit. These are where the Word of God is read and the Word of God is preached. But there's a separation between you and so the choir area is the next stage of heaven. So that's the church triumphant. These are the saints, the choirs of angels, all those things. A little bit further, you have the sanctuary where the Holy of Holies is. This is where God is. This is where how the temple was kind of broken down, and this is how it works. And so in the realm between heaven and earth, essentially, is you get a godly word read and a godly message preached. So the message comes from even from on high. Practically, you have to be above everyone to be seen. But theologically, these are the words of God coming to the people, so they look up to see. Same thing with the pulpit. And then what gets even more fun is in some churches where the pulpit and the lectern are. Sometimes they're a little bit further back, but sometimes they're right even with with what's called the rood screen. It's called the rood screen because it has a rood on top, R-O-O-D, which is the cross, and so it has the crucified Christ, sometimes with Mary and John looking up at him. So in order to get to heaven, you have to come through Christ, through the cross. Then you enter up into the choir, and the choir always robed because they're the church triumphant. So that's why they have at least the surplice on. And so now you're going higher, and you're hearing the songs being sung, the choirs of angels, and then you have the priest going up even further. And you have where the altar is, and this is the Holy of Holies of the tabernacle, the heavenly reality that we're participating in, which is the sacrifice of Christ continually being offered.
Before you continue, the rood screen is the what part of the church?
In some places, it's the barrier between the altar and not the altar, I'm sorry, the choir and where the people sit. Because you also notice that what do you have to do in our church to get to the choir? You got to walk up some steps. Mm-hmm. And that's on purpose because you're ascending higher into heaven. Yeah. And that is
Good word.
Yeah.
Good word.
Yeah, so and then it's marked off by a rail. And the rail is railed off, and it's railed off from the rest because in the sanctuary is symbolic of the Holy of Holies. So when you come up to receive communion, you're not entering all the way in, but you're entering into heaven to receive from heaven the body and blood of Christ Himself, and then you're going now back to the world. And so all of this is meant to be able to give you more than just if you were there. And so you have the different participants. Why we have all of that, we'll get into later. But just the building in itself has immense theological that once you see it, you're like, oh, that I totally get that. And then when you don't see it, you're like, wait, so what's this saying about the Mass now? Because like in Vatican II, they changed the layout of the building so that now they've taken so it used to be forward going, now it's more central type thing. So they have kind of your church in the center, and you have your arms here, and everyone's going, and so they come to the center to receive the meal, and so it's more emphasis on the meal of the Eucharist rather than that ascent to heaven.
It's like dinner theater.
Yeah. And
That's how I
so
feel when I go to those churches. I feel
Theater
like
in
I'm
the
going
round.
to the
yeah, and it's
dinner
and
theater.
it's got to, because we're meant to understand this journey from earth to heaven. But they're saying essentially, when you come in, you are in heaven, invited to the heavenly banquet. Yeah. And so that's what the churches in the Catholic Church are saying. And then you have other churches.
Is it kind of like St. Peter's? Got the, because it's in the shape of a cross.
Yeah, even the cross, even the building of the building itself is the form of a cross. Yes, you have your little transepts that are cruciform.
This is St. Peter's where?
Rome.
Rome.
Oh, in Rome. Oh, yeah.
Lots of places.
I was thinking
Like
somewhere in Texas.
St. Lawrence in Grapevine. You go in there and you walk in, and you have your nave, and then you have your sanctuary. They have the choir in back, but that's choirs of angels. You see how that works. But then you have your little transepts off to the side for extra seating, and behind this you have a side chapel. It's to get more people in, but it's in the form of a cross.
The Catholic church that Mike's mom goes to, you have your nave and all that, and then when you walk into the worship area, you have long rows of pews. On the side, you have long rows of pews, or short rows of pews. The choir, the altar's here, which is above everybody. The choir is to, if you're looking at it this way, to the left of the altar. And then you have the pulpit and the reader on the same side.
Yeah, you have like an ambo type thing, a movable.
But now they have bands too up
Yeah.
in front.
So it
Yeah.
kind of changes, but it says things theologically about what it does. But we'll have to get into that later because I have 5 minutes. So
That is great.
Oh.
Oh my gosh, these are things.
I know.